bit of breaking election news for you tonight. The Michigan Senate matchup has now been set, as CNN can now project that Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and former GOP Congressman Mike Rogers will both win their respective primaries tonight, setting up a showdown as they are vying for the retiring Senator Debbie Stabinov's seat, a Democrat, of course, making this a consequential general election race that could determine the balance of the Senate. Certainly one to keep your eye on as we are looking at the broader race overall, the 2024 race.
Hold on one second. We have some breaking news coming out right now because Congresswoman Cori Bush losing her congressional seat in Missouri's 1st District. So-called squad member faced a fierce primary challenge from Democratic opponent Wesley Bell. That's after his campaign saw an influx of cash from the Israel-aligned super PAC, AIPAC, along with other similar lobbying groups. Together, they injected more than $8 million into the campaign, making this one of the most expensive House primaries in history. We'll have more on this story later this hour. Mehdi, this is interesting news. What's your reaction?
As you mentioned just there, one of the most expensive House primaries in recent history. The most expensive, of course, was Jamal Bowman, who just lost a few weeks ago to a candidate also backed by AIPAC, Super PAC. We talk a lot about democracy on this show, on our networks. I think if we're going to have a conversation about democracy, we have to talk about the role of money, unlimited money, dark money in our races. $23 million, I think, spent in Jamal Bowman's race, $8.5 million by the United Democracy Project here. By the way, that's an AIPAC-aligned super PAC, which gets a lot of money from Republicans. According to Politico, it's the biggest source of Republican money in Democratic primaries. So the system has to be fixed. You can like Cori Bush. I happen to like her. A lot of people don't like her. Whether you like her or not, I don't think anyone's okay with a system where you these groups spend millions and millions of dollars on an issue that,
Crowley, what's your reaction, given not only the money, but also this is somebody with her particular viewpoints, known as one of the progressive members of the House, now losing her seat, that in addition to now Jamal Bowman?
Well, I do agree. I think that money plays a terrible role in terms of the election and the election process. And I think that Citizens United was a horrible decision by the Supreme Court that has really set back the American body politics. In terms of, I think the person she lost against, or she lost to this evening, their records are probably going to be very, very close, very, very similar. As my record for AOC's is very, very close as well. So in that sense, it's not that, but I think it's more of a pushback on maybe some of the extremes that we're seeing in the far left or the far right. I think we're seeing a pushback further in the Democratic caucus. Then, unfortunately, I wish we'd see more pushback on the far right and these people who bow down to their dear leader all the time. You don't see that really happening on our side. We push back more on our side.
Brian, do you have a reaction?
Yeah, listen, I think it's a good thing. I happen to work for Citizens United. I support speech. I think speech is an important thing of a Constitution, and we don't have enough of it in our campaigns, so I'm going to defend that. But, listen, she was out of wax with her district. She picked some very powerful enemies that came back and sort of pushed against her and were successful against it. I mean, that is the democratic process. You pick your enemies, you pick your friends, you pick your alliances, and you sort of let the voters choose.
Who was the powerful enemy she picked?
Well, she was very anti-Israel. So I mean, she's very much an anti-Israel member of Congress, and that's what you see. You see the Israel the pro-Israel people in the United States sort of flexing their muscle and saying, enough of these types of candidates in the Democratic Party. We need somebody who's going to work as a consensus, not continue to sort of move the party to the far left. At least that's what I've seen, and the voters have made the decision today.
Karen, I hear your reaction.
Well, I'm not going to speak to the particulars of this race, but one of the things that I think we have lost in this conversation about having just spent a week in the West Bank and in Israel is there should be no issue with saying I am pro the Palestinian people, I am anti-Hamas, which is evil, I am pro the Israeli people. I do not think that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making Israel safer. And we've sort of lost some of those nuances in this conversation, and it's become just very, you're pro or you're anti. No, I'm actually pro the people, and I'm anti people who use their position to hold on to power to escape being held accountable.
Really quick, I want to hear from you, Kristen. Do voters see, you're our pollster, do voters see the nuance, and is it an either or in assessing how they feel about candidates on these issues?
So in general, this is not an issue that is a top issue for the vast majority of voters, but you are seeing it pop up in Democratic primaries as motivational. Think about the uncommitted movement during the Democratic primary, where within the party, when Biden was still sort of considered he's the incumbent president, he's going to be renominated, there was a movement to try to make the case, no, we think he's wrong on this. So it's the sort of thing that I actually don't see making a big difference with swing voters, but it certainly is playing a role in terms of motivating Democratic progressive voters.
Well, certainly has motivated in this particular Democratic primary. Stand by, everyone. Ahead, we'll talk more about this. And look, from a high school teacher to now a vice presidential running mate and candidate. How did Tim Walz go to where he is now? And will his folksy sort of Minnesota background help Democrats in November or not? Next, a friend who went on morning runs with him in Congress. I'm talking about Beto O'Rourke. He joins me in just a moment.
All right, we have some other breaking news, political news that I want to ask you about. Representative Cori Bush lost her primary in Missouri. Tonight, she is the second member of the so-called progressive squad in Congress to now be ousted. What does this loss tell you?
Oh, this is the second. It might be the last because Ilhan Omar has a primary next week, and she's in better shape than Bush has been. The second victory by AIPAC, by pro-Israel donors, by also the crypto industry that's funded this PAC Fair Shakes that spent money in the race. United Democracy Project, the AIPAC organization, spent around $9 million against Bush. And the strategy here was like it was in New York against Jamal Bowman, to find her early on because of her vote against the infrastructure bill and her record in Congress, not just as somebody who is anti-Israel, the ads weren't about that, as somebody who wasn't a good Democrat dealing with the party to get things done. And so they're going to declare victory. I think they already have, and say that what happened to Cori Bush proves that Democrats can't be too critical of funding Israel, supporting Israel. They can't call for an immediate ceasefire or conditioning aid. They can't be mealy-mouthed about Hamas. That's two victories by the pro-Israel. I wouldn't even say wing of the Democratic Party, because this is Democratic and Republican donors. And it comes in the context of a lot of progressives being very happy that Tim Walz, who was reaching out to the uncommitted delegates, who had a very different tenor, even though he's pro-Israel, talking about it than Josh Shapiro did. This is the flip side of it. There are two fewer progressives in the next Congress, even if Democrats win it, who lost their seats because they crossed the pro-Israel donor base, the Israel lobby. That's the overall message here.
All right, Dave, thank you for joining us tonight. When we return, let the battle of the Veeps begin. How adding Tim Walz to the Democratic ticket shakes up the race for the White House when the 11th hour continues.
We now know how vocal the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party can be. That is why, at least one of the reasons, Kamala Harris did not pick Josh Shapiro. That very Democratic group, they're the ones who are burning American flags, chanting death to the Jews outside the White House and Capitol. They're the most vocal part of the Democratic Party right now. And that's why Josh Shapiro did not get picked to be the first Jewish vice president. We don't know how big that movement is. We might find out in Chicago if they come out to protest. But my hometown of St. Louis will give us a sense of things tonight. Really, how big is the pro-Hamas movement? Hamas apologist and Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush faces a pro-Israel, moderately progressive, and very well-funded primary challenger tonight. He's named Wesley Bell. The same groups behind ousting Hamas enthusiast and Tim Walz mega supporter Jamal Bowman, they want to get rid of Bush as well. The Jews living in Bush's district, 1st Congressional District of Missouri, full disclosure, they are my relatives, many are. They face a relatively easy choice in tonight's election because both candidates are liberal. It's a Democratic primary. American Jews, more broadly, will face a far tougher decision this fall between choosing to be liberal or choosing to be Jewish in the presidential race. Josh Shapiro seemed to try to put all of those issues to bed. Could he do it, or did he steal the show with his white-soled sneakers?
If I hear you right, and I think I do, You're chanting, he's a weirdo.
Speaking of far-left politics, a little bit of breaking news coming in here. Maybe we can put this up on the screen. Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush, of course, member of the squad, we're being told that Wesley Bell, the race has been called by the Associated Press, the primary race, and Wesley Bell appears to be the victor in that race. Wesley Bell spent about $10 million on it. Cori Bush spent about $9 million. Would be the second member of the squad to be ousted. It's kind of some big news there. Meantime, back to Tim Wall. Live look now in St. Louis County, Missouri. Cori Bush, the representative there from Missouri, apparently lost her race tonight, says the Associated Press, and now she's kind of giving some excuses as to why she lost. Let's listen in for a few seconds.
And so this here was its own type of on the people, but that's okay, because at this time, I'm taking all y'all, whoever ready, we're about to be banging to the end.
Yeah, her microphone's kind of cutting in and out, but there you have it. Cori Bush apparently has lost her race tonight. That is the second member of the squad who is out, and they are going after a few more of them.
Finally tonight, in 1 minute, the polls close in the state of Missouri and another squad member could go down. Cori Bush fighting for her political life, trying to hold on to her seat. The challenger, Wesley Bell, consistently leading in the polls, backed by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, could be the deciding factor. The headline from WAPO yesterday saying pro-Israel pouring in millions to defeat Cori Bush. And if she loses, she is going to go berserk. You know, this one really enjoys feeling important in Congress, boasting about how much she spends on her own security while pushing to defund the police and leaving her own voters very vulnerable to violent crime. You remember this beauty.
I'm going to make sure I have security because I know I have had attempts on my life and I have too much work to do. There are too many people that need help right now for me to allow that. So if I end up spending $200,000, if I spend $10 more on it, you know what? I get to be here to do the work. So suck it up, and defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police and put that money into social safety net.
She could be done. The polls just closed. Prime News is coming up next. Bob, go ahead.
Okay, Kimberly Dukart joins us live now from D.C. with the latest on several key primaries around the United States. Busy day at the ballot box. Kim, what do you got?
Indeed. Good evening, Bob. Voters across America heading to the polls today. Primary elections are happening in 4 states: Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. And we begin tonight in St. Louis, Missouri, where polls are now closed. The Democrat primary for the 1st Congressional District, Congresswoman Cori Bush fighting for her political life this evening in the Show Me state after being drastically outraised and falling behind in the polls to her primary challenger, prosecutor Wesley Bell. Still awaiting results. Congressman Bush has been frequently critical of Israel and has been labeled anti-Semitic by her critics. The Washington Post noting this week pro-Israel interests poured millions of dollars into defeating a second squad member, definitely playing a major impact in this race. Now, in Missouri's race for Attorney General, incumbent Attorney General Andrew Bailey takes on Trump attorney Will Scharf, both endorsed by Trump. And in Michigan's Republican Senate primary, Trump-backed Mike Rogers taking on former Congressman Justin Amash, who, while serving in Congress back in 2019, voted to impeach then President Trump. Rogers with a sizable early lead there. Now stick with Newsmax for the primary election results throughout the evening. I'm Kimberly Dukart. Bob?
As always, thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. Okay, coming up, tensions are flaring and running high in the Middle East as the White House believes an Iranian attack on Israel is imminent and could come at any moment. Our foreign policy panel is here to discuss what happens next. Stick with us.
Good evening. I'm Kelmany Dukart. Voters across America heading to the polls today. Primary elections happening in 4 states, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. We begin tonight in St. Louis, Missouri, where polls are now closed. The Democrat primary for the 1st Congressional District. Congresswoman Cori Bush fighting for her political life this evening in the Show Me state after being drastically outraised and falling behind in the polls to her primary challenger, Prosecutor Wesley Bell. And right now, Congresswoman Bush is behind with around 20% of the vote in. Wesley Bell with over 60% of the vote. Still no projection. Congresswoman Bush has been frequently critical of Israel and has been labeled anti-Semitic by her critics. The Washington Post noting this week, pro-Israel interests poured millions into defeating a second squad member, definitely playing a major impact in this race. And in Missouri's race for Attorney General, Newsmax projects incumbent Attorney General Andrew Bailey will defeat Trump attorney Will Scharf. Trump endorsed both candidates. And in Michigan's Republican Senate primary, Newsmax projects Trump-backed Mike Rogers to defeat former Congressman Justin Amash. Amash, while serving in Congress back in 2019, voted to impeach then-President Trump. Rogers will take on Alyssa Slotkin in November. Stick with Newsmax for primary election results. Reporting live from the nation's capital, I'm Kelmany Dukart.
Ooh, Cori Bush, the radical squad member from Missouri, is poised to potentially lose her primary tonight. Wild. See you tomorrow.